knew I was doomed the moment I heard the pigeons rapping. Haven't we learned anything from the rapping Italian dog on the Titanic movie? Hello, I'm Avery, and welcome to another short puppet review. Today, we're covering the new Tom and Jerry movie. Or is it just Tom and Jerry? Or is it Tom and Jerry the movie? But I think there was an older movie about them, also called Tom and Jerry the movie. You know what? I'm just gonna call this Tom and Jerry another movie, another one, because they've made a lot of movies, and that's the only way I'm gonna keep track. So right off the bat, there you could kind of tell there wasn't going to be anything remotely fascinating about this movie. It's one of those films that teeters between being kind of bad and kind of good. It's just mediocre. That's probably the best way to describe it. It's got some fun stuff for little kids, and I've definitely seen and heard of a lot worse. You could be watching worse things out there for sure, but it's definitely not anything great. Sort of the weirdest thing about this movie was probably their whole cartoon to live action, but there was kind of one good element where all of the animals in the world were cartoon animals, so that way you didn't have like cartoon cat next to real life cat, which would have made things really weird. So they kind of knew the universe they had, they just wanted the people live action. But if you have all your animals cartoons, I don't know why you couldn't make the whole thing cartoon. Probably money related, I don't know. So in this, all of the animals, including Tom and Jerry, are cartoon based, but they do have sort of slight 3D elements to them. It's kind of like that weird, uncanny valley surreal experience. The closest thing I could compare it to was that Rocky and Bullwinkle movie. Just put up a picture of that. Yeah. It kind of feels a bit like that when you're staring at it. It's not unpleasant, but you can tell that they're not there. And you can certainly tell that the people involved don't really realize that they're there either. But that's just the visual stuff. What about the storyline? Well, there's technically a story. There's mostly a story involving this girl who kind of hijacks her way into this fancy hotel job, and she's got to be in charge of planning a wedding in this big fancy hotel, and she's got to do that, but then Jerry wants to move into the hotel, so it becomes her job to get rid of Jerry, and then she gets Tom involved somehow, so they're kind of woven into the plot. But if you've ever seen any of those sort of Tom and Jerry movies where they're doing Tom and Jerry antics through classic movies like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or Wizard of Oz, this movie kind of had the same vibe to it. It was like Tom and Jerry get inserted into a Nickelodeon or Disney Channel based movie. The movie. The sequel. The reboot. Now I'm confused again. You do get a lot of Tom and Jerry moments, which makes sense since it is a Tom and Jerry movie. But anytime they cut to the humans and focus on them, they just feel like they're in an entirely different movie. Like I said, it kind of had that Nickelodeon Disney Channel vibe to it. But then you cut to Tom and Jerry and you're like, oh, well now it's the Tom and Jerry antics. And it's just that there's a tone shift anytime Tom and Jerry are on screen or off screen. And then when they're interacting with the humans, it's some sort of weird middle ground. So it's interesting. The tone of this movie is just kind of like watching a tennis match. It just keeps going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I can't really tell which tone I liked more than the other one. They both kind of felt okay. Again, I never felt uncomfortable watching anything, but it was just okay. Of course, if you're not the biggest Tom and Jerry fan, then you're probably not gonna like, Tom and Jerry the movie. But if you do like Tom and Jerry and you are a bit of a Tom and Jerry fan, again, it's kind of on that same level as sort of those other weird mixed crossover movies they have. But you do get a lot of slapstick with Tom and Jerry, and there are some interesting concepts in there. But because they're built to be animated and tried to be put into this realistic world, all of their slapstick comes off as slightly slower than it usually does. In all 2D, it's really easy to make movements go fast and quick and do all sorts of weird stretching. And Tom and Jerry themselves do all of those cartoony antics here in this movie, but then they're also using their slapstick with real-life objects and props. And that's where things start to slow down a bit, because you can't make those objects cartoony. So some of the slapstick moments are a little bit lost, just based on the medium they chose to film things in. The dialogue is more or less okay too. Again, most of the dialogue is with the humans, and it's very sort of Nickelodeon Disney Channel-esque, and luckily Tom and Jerry do not speak at all as they do in the original cartoons and most reiterations. There was one exception though, but I don't want to think about that exception. But so it's good that, you know, they didn't really talk. They sort of kept to keeping the animals as not being able to speak, with the exception of that one bulldog, but that's always kind of been a thing, so I don't know what's up with him. So if you're just looking for something to watch sort of in the background, well, maybe you're busy doing your chores, or you just want something lighthearted that you don't want to think about too hard to watch, I mean, you can go ahead and put this on. If you got smaller children, I'd say this would be a movie that they might like. But again, the fact that the slapstick isn't nearly as fast when it interacts with the live action objects might make the interest dwindle just a little bit more compared to an original Tom and Jerry cartoon or any of their 2D movies where the action's going to be a lot faster. So overall, it was okay. Which is more than I can say for some films. So, you know, you win some, you lose some. And that is it for this review. If you liked hearing me talk about the Tom and Jerry movie, go ahead and put a pause up and press that like button. And, you know, I don't actually know if comments are going to be open on this or not. So, just enjoy traversing through the YouTube hemisphere, I suppose. I'm going to figure out what to do next. I'm probably just going to sit back and wait until I can get access to Raya and the Last Dragon. Yeah. I wonder what we have in the fridge.